this right here, you bunch of prima donna ballerina mother.
Hi, welcome to SBR Videos. I'm Peter Loshak. We are continuing our coverage, our off-season coverage of college football teams with Steve from collegefootballwinning.com. That's all he covers all year round is college football, no other sport. And, his advice and his insights have proven to be invaluable in our videos over the year. It's early July right now. We're going to take a look at Stanford. Steve, thanks for being back with us.
Thank you for having me back, Peter.
All right, Stanford. They've always been an interesting team betting-wise, and they should be again this upcoming year. We'll see what you have to say about them. Before we get to it, give a plug for collegefootballwinning.com.
Thank you, Peter. I'd be happy to. At collegefootballwinning.com, as you said, all we do is college football betting analysis all year round. That's our only focus. I believe we're the only such service that offers a 100% money-back guarantee on the entire season. Now, we're a company founded on making our betting selections through algorithms. So our college football betting algorithms, we just call that our formula. That formula last season was 66.18% against the spread. Lifetime, it's been 63.04% against the spread. So we hope people want to join us. Now's a great time to do it. This is before the season starts, so you can get the entire season with us. If you go to collegefootballwinning.com and you type in coupon code SBR10, that's SBR10, you'll get 10% off of any membership that we're currently offering.
All right, sounds good, Steve. Now let's talk about Stanford. Right now they are 32-1 at Pinnacle to win the title in 2015. That puts them tied for 11th according to Pinnacle's odds. And Stanford, an interesting team. We've discussed them before. For many years they were sort of systematically undervalued by the market, and they were a good bet year in and year out. Last year, though, maybe the market caught up. They were 11-3 straight up, but just 7-7 against the spread. So what can we expect from them this upcoming year? I'm not exactly sure. What are your opinions, Steve?
Good introduction to Stanford, Peter. We're going to look at three things. We want to consider Stanford against the spread for 2014, what we're looking at. We want to consider a national championship futures bet. And I think with Stanford, we want to look at a prop bet for their season win totals. So you and I, I had an article and you and I had a video come out on SBR, and it was called Conditions for Profitable College Football Betting. So we outlined three principles that were desirable if you wanted to have a profitable against the spread college football season. Number one was be unranked in the preseason polls, namely the AP. Now, Stanford has been ranked in the preseason AP top 25 only 6 times since 1982, so the last 32 years, but 3 of those 6 times happen to be the last 3 years. And it looks like this will be their 7th time, their 4th consecutive year, being ranked in the preseason top 25. We think they'll be a top 15 team. We feel pretty confident they're going to be a top 15 team. So there are expectations for Stanford now, and that is not a good thing against the spread, considering an entire season for a college football team. Second principle: be unprofitable the prior season against the spread. Well, as you said, Stanford was 7-7. 50% in the world of bet 11 to win 10 is unprofitable. Profitable is defined at the break-even point is 52.38%. So they were unprofitable. At the past 12 seasons, 75% of the time that Stanford was unprofitable for a season, they were profitable the next season. So that actually is something that is a good sign that Stanford was unprofitable last season, but they weren't unprofitable by much. The third principle: increase their straight-up wins from the prior season. Now, this of the three principles might have the most weight for football teams, college football teams in general. Stanford is a little bit unique this way, but I still think this is probably the most important category for them. The last 10 seasons, 85.71% of the time that Stanford increased their straight-up wins from the prior season, they had a profitable against the spread season. 2/3 of the time that Stanford decreased their straight-up wins from the prior season, they were unprofitable. So looking at the 2013, last year's Stanford team, they had 11 straight-up overall wins, as you said. Now, in order to exceed 11 wins this season, which is what we're looking for to fulfill this third principle, so the question is, can they do that? Can they get to 12 wins? 6 out of David Shaw's 7 straight-up losses were in away games. 6 out of his 7 losses. In 2014, Stanford is playing away. They have to go to Washington. They have to go to Notre Dame, Arizona State, Oregon, and Eugene. They have to go to UCLA, and that UCLA game is just 6 days after Stanford's the big game, against Cal. And by the way, that's at Cal. So the conclusion for us is we do not believe they are going to exceed their 11 straight-up wins from last season. Now, we are going to have an article along with this video, or we do, on SBR, and it previews Stanford of 2014, 2015, just like this video does. But in the video, in the article, we show 2 charts. One chart shows Jim Harbaugh's 4 years coaching at Stanford, and the second one shows David Shaw's 3 years so far coaching at Stanford. And what it's showing is margin of victory against the spread. So another way of looking at that is, how have they been exceeding expectations, or have they been exceeding expectations? Now, if you look at the Jim Harbaugh chart, it just goes up steadily. So he exceeded expectations year after year. So he was progressively getting better. Now you look at the David Shaw chart, and it's exactly the opposite. So it's got a downward slope to it. Consistently, that margin of victory against the spread has been getting smaller and smaller. So we believe expectations have, as you suggested at the top of the video, they have been catching up to Stanford and David Shaw. Speaking of that, more concerns. We have pretty considerable offensive line concerns for Stanford. They're going to have the fewest offensive line collective starts on their offensive line in the Pac-12. 2014, this will be the most inexperienced offensive line that David Shaw has had at Stanford. Now, previously, the most inexperienced offensive line David Shaw had was 2012. And even that offensive line had 42% more collective starts than this 2014 offensive line is going to have. And what's the big deal about that 2012 team? That 2012 team that had few starts, or the second fewest starts under David Shaw? Well, Stanford allowed the most sacks that year per game since Jim Harbaugh's second year of building that program, and it was their worst rushing yards per carry average since Jim Harbaugh's first year. And I'll remind you, he took over a 1-win Stanford team. So how did that 2012 team get to 12 straight-up wins? They had 12 wins that year. They won 8 of their 12 games by 1 touchdown or less. And they had the greatest number of positive turnover margin games in the Harbaugh or Shaw era. So good fortune was definitely on their side there. So don't think that they had few starts then and they were great, so they could do the same thing here this year. Good fortune was on their side. You cannot count on fortune being on their side in 2014. So Stanford of 2013, their 2014 offensive line, they're going to have less than 30 collective career starts. Putting that into perspective, the last 2 seasons, so-called Power 5 conference teams that returned less than 30 starts on the offensive line collectively, they had just a 3.51 rushing yards per carry average. That's serious for Stanford, a team that likes to run the ball nearly 2/3 of the time. They averaged just 5.5 straight-up wins, and they beat the spread at a rate of just 43.75%. Not good. Concern number 2, defense. 2014, they're returning just over 54% of their tackles from 2013. Well, in 2013, when we were doing this video last year, they were returning more than 80% of their tackles. The year before, 2012, more than 68% of their tackles. So we're going to see a real drop-off here. And I think something huge, the loss of linebacker Shane Scove is massive. Scove led the team in tackles in 2010, 2012, and 2013. So 3 out of the last 4 years. He was not present in 2011. He took a medical redshirt. So when he was there, they had a top 10 scoring defense. The 1 year he took off, medical redshirt, they were not even in the top 25 for scoring defense. So we think that is considerable. Now you add that in there, they have a new defensive coordinator. He is promoted from within, but that certainly does not help with our defensive concerns. Our season conclusion, we do not believe that Stanford is going to exceed 11 straight-up wins, even including a Pac-12 championship game and or a bowl game. We are not particularly hopeful about their against the spread record in 2014. We're definitely not going to have any money on a futures bet, but we think you should consider a prop bet at under 9.5 straight up wins, even at minus 170, which is where we found it right now. But full disclosure, I personally will not make that bet until we get closer to the season. I want more information on Stanford, and I want to see where this line goes, 9.5 minus 170. But I think that's something to consider. Now, some Stanford trends before I let you go. Under David Shaw, they're just 2-5 against the spread when they're outrushed. When they average at least 8 yards per play, and that's happened 7 times, they are 6-1 against the spread. When they're getting a minority of the public betting, which, believe it or not, does not happen that often with Stanford, but when they do get that minority of public betting, they're 6-0 against the spread. So look for that. Line movement. So line movement defined as the difference between the opening number and the closing betting line has indicated the wrong side in 2/3 of all of Stanford's away games under David Shaw. Reverse line movement. Usually an indicator of where the sharp money has gone when it opposes a majority of public bets. Under David Shaw, so far, we have tracked 9 instances of reverse line movement. That side, the reverse line movement side, supposedly the sharp side, has been wrong in 7 out of 9 of those games. So don't look for reverse line movement to be that big key to help you win your games. Totals. The total has gone under in 70% of Stanford's away games, and just away games in general. Now, if we remove neutral site games, including bowl games, so that we have Stanford as a true visitor in someone else's stadium, the total has gone under 81.25% of the time. That's extraordinary, especially considering the fact that in all their games, the public majority has been on the over 95.12% of all their games, more than 95% of the time. So you got to watch those overs and look for the under in those true away games. So our conclusion, our money's not going to be on Stanford for a national championship futures bet this year. We're not particularly optimistic about them having a profitable against the spread year, but we are going to be considering that prop bet under 9.5 wins.
All right, Steve, invaluable information and insights as always. Thanks so much.